There are places on this planet that do not belong to us. They exist beyond maps, beyond reason, beyond the fragile rules that govern ordinary human life. Places where survival is not guaranteed by experience, preparation, or good intentions. Places where nature does not negotiate. Northern Yukon was one of them. To the outside world, it was marketed as untouched beauty, endless pine forests, glacial rivers cutting through ancient valleys, mountains so vast they made humans feel insignificant. But to those who lived there long enough, it was something else entirely. A place that watched, a place that waited, a place that erased people. This is not just a disappearance story. This is not just a murder investigation. This is a story about what happens when curiosity crosses into isolation. And isolation turns predatory. And it begins with two people who believed love and preparation were enough. Be sure to subscribe for more real crime stories, keeping you current on all things criminal. This is Crime Hall. In early August 2023, Caleb Morgan and Elena Pierce boarded a flight from Seattle to Whitehorse, Canada. They were young. Caleb was 27 and Elena was 25. Friends described them as the kind of couple who seemed permanently connected, finishing each other's sentences, sharing the same ambitions, moving through life like a synchronized pair. They had been together for 4 years and bonded over one obsession: wilderness exploration. Caleb worked remotely as a data systems analyst, methodical, calculated. He treated every hike like a mission plan. Spreadsheets, route breakdowns, contingencies. Elena was a freelance visual artist and travel photographer, emotional, curious, drawn to places that felt untouched and alive. She didn't hike to conquer nature, she hiked to listen to it. They were not amateurs. They had logged dozens of backcountry expeditions across Washington, British Columbia, and Montana. But the Yukon was different. It wasn't just another destination. It was the dream. For over a year, they planned a 9-day trek through a little visited section of Tombstone Territorial Park, an area known for brutal weather shifts and long stretches without human presence. Their plan included a deliberate deviation. They would follow a known trail for the first phase, then branch off into an unofficial side valley, rarely used except by trappers and seasonal workers. Elena described it in her journal as the place where silence doesn't echo back. They packed meticulously: satellite communicator, emergency locator beacon, 10 days of food, bear deterrent, cold weather gear, detailed topographic maps. Everything suggested they were prepared. Everything suggested they would come back. On August 28th, they rented a 4-wheel drive vehicle, stocked final supplies, and drove north into the park. The last confirmed contact came the evening of August 30th. Elena sent a message to her older brother through the satellite communicator. It read, "It's unreal out here. Feels like we crossed into another world." The GPS tag placed them exactly where they had planned to leave the main trail and enter the side valley. After that, nothing. At first, no one panicked. Satellite communicators frequently lose signal in deep terrain. Caleb and Elena were expected to exit on September 6th. But when September 7th came and went, when September 8th passed, and their rental vehicle remained untouched at the trailhead, park authorities initiated a search. What followed was a race against time. Early September in the Yukon is a dangerous threshold. Summer collapses into winter without warning. Snowfall can begin overnight. Rivers swell, visibility disappears. Search teams deployed immediately. Ground units, helicopters, canine teams. They focused on the side valley, a nightmare of steep ravines, dense undergrowth, and glacial runoff. And yet, there was nothing. No campsite, no discarded gear, no torn clothing, no blood, no signs of an animal encounter. It was as if the couple had simply stepped out of existence. By mid-September, a heavy snowstorm swept through the region, burying the terrain under meters of fresh snow. Continuing the search became too dangerous. With reluctance, authorities suspended active operations until spring. Officially, Caleb Morgan and Elena Pierce were declared missing, presumed deceased. The wilderness had claimed them, or so everyone believed. For their families, winter was torture. Hope faded slowly, then violently. Each day without news reshaped their grief into something heavier than theft. Not mourning, but suspension. They weren't waiting for rescue anymore. They were waiting for answers. What no one knew was that beneath the frozen valley, something had been waiting too. Preserved, hidden, silent. And when the thaw finally came, the truth would be far worse than anyone imagined. Winter in the Yukon is not just a season, it is a suspension of reality. For nearly 8 months, the mountains locked everything beneath ice and silence. Trails vanished, rivers froze. Whatever secrets the land held were sealed away, preserved in cold like evidence in a vault. And then, in late May 2024, the thaw began. Snow receded from south-facing slopes. Meltwater cut fresh scars through ravines. The land slowly revealed what it had been hiding since the previous summer. That was when Nathan Cole went into the valley. Nathan Cole had worked as a territorial park ranger for over 30 years. He was 58 years old, lean, quiet, the kind of man who spoke only when words were necessary. He had spent more time alone in the wilderness than most people spend around others. His assignment that week was routine. Inspect backcountry trails after winter, assess avalanche damage, identify fallen trees and erosion risks. He was not searching for missing people. He had already accepted, like everyone else, that Caleb Morgan and Elena Pierce were gone. On the third day of his patrol, Nathan moved through the very side valley where the couple's trail had disappeared the year before. The air was unnervingly still. No wind, no insects, just the sound of melting snow dripping somewhere unseen. Nathan remembered the search. Everyone did, but he expected nothing. The Yukon does not give things back easily. Late in the afternoon, navigating the edge of a steep ravine, Nathan noticed something unnatural below him. A patch of blue. Bright artificial wrong. At first, he assumed it was trash. Perhaps part of a tarp or abandoned gear uncovered by the melt. He muttered under his breath and carefully began descending the slope. Gripping tree roots and branches for balance. As he got closer, his stomach tightened. It wasn't trash. It was a technical hiking jacket. And it wasn't empty. A human shoulder protruded from the ice. Nathan froze. He had found bodies before. Accidents, exposure victims, hunters caught in avalanches. He knew the protocol. He did not touch anything. Instead, he backed away slowly and radioed in. "Dispatch, this is Cole. I have a confirmed body, likely connected to last year's missing hikers. Request immediate air support and investigation unit." His voice was steady, but his hands were not. While waiting for the helicopter, Nathan surveyed the scene from a distance. The body belonged to a young woman. Her clothing matched the description of Elena, Pierce's gear from missing person bulletins. But it was her face that made Nathan's blood turn cold. This was not animal activity. Her injuries were deliberate. Her eyes were gone, cleanly removed. Her tongue had been cut out, severed at the root. Her mouth was left open in a frozen, silent scream. The wounds were precise, controlled, intentional. This was not rage. This was not desperation. This was ritual. Nathan had spent decades in the wilderness, but he had never seen anything like it. And then he noticed something else. Around the body, the snow was pristine, untouched, except for footprints. Clear impressions of heavy hiking boots radiated outward from the body in multiple directions, like spokes on a wheel. But there was something deeply wrong. There were no footprints leading toward the body, only away from it. Nathan followed one set carefully. It extended about 25 meters, straight across the snowfield. Then it stopped. No turn, no disturbance, no return path. Just an ending. He checked another trail. Same thing. Each set of prints began near the body and vanished mid-stride. It was as if whoever made them had simply ceased to exist. A cold, primal fear crawled up Nathan's spine. This wasn't just a crime scene. This place was wrong. He radioed again, his voice lower now. "Dispatch. Update scene is abnormal. Advise responding units to proceed with caution." When the helicopter arrived, even seasoned investigators fell silent. They stared at the body frozen in ice, at the mutilation, at the impossible footprints. No one spoke for several seconds. The priority became speed. The snow was melting. Evidence was disappearing by the minute. The team documented everything. High-resolution photographs, plaster casts of the footprints, drone imaging of the ravine, a full 3D scan of the terrain. Every angle, every anomaly. Nothing made sense. Walking backward to erase tracks was impossible on that terrain. Jumping would have left deeper impressions. Rappelling left no rope marks. Climbing trees left no broken branches. It defied physics. It defied logic. Elena Pierce's body was extracted with extreme care and flown to Whitehorse for examination. The autopsy confirmed the nightmare. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the back of the head, followed by hypothermia. But the mutilation occurred after death. The cuts were surgical, clean, purposeful. No signs of sexual assault, no defensive wounds. This was not about violence. It was about meaning. Then came the detail that shifted the investigation in a terrifying direction. The footprints, they belonged to a men's hiking boot, size 11. That was Caleb Morgan's size. Investigators exchanged uneasy looks. A possibility emerged, one no one wanted to voice. What if Caleb hadn't vanished? What if he was still alive after Elena died? What if he was responsible? The theory was horrifying, and yet, it explained nothing. Where was he? Why leave such impossible evidence? How did he disappear without a trace? And if he was innocent, then someone else had been in that valley. Someone skilled, someone methodical, someone who knew how to disappear. The case was no longer a disappearance. It was a hunt. Once Elena Pierce's death was confirmed, the nature of the operation changed overnight. This was no longer a missing person case. This was a murder investigation. And somewhere in the wilderness, one man was either a victim or a killer. Within days of the autopsy, authorities relaunched the search for Caleb Morgan. But this time, they weren't calling out his name hoping for an answer. They were looking for a body, a weapon, or a man who had learned how to vanish. Search teams returned to the side valley with new urgency. Every cave, ravine, abandoned trapper's shelter, and glacial crevasse was examined. Still, nothing. No blood, no equipment, no remains. Caleb Morgan had not left behind a single trace beyond the boot size, stamped into the snow beside Elena's body. As June turned into July, frustration grew. Investigators were chasing a ghost. The theory that Caleb killed Elena was weak. Everyone who knew them described a healthy, affectionate relationship. There was no history of violence, jealousy, or mental instability. Even more troubling were the logistics. If Caleb had killed Elena, where was the weapon? Why mutilate her body post-mortem? Why leave the body in a ravine but hide his own? How did he erase his tracks? And if he had died afterward, nature should have found him. The Yukon does not miss bodies easily, which meant one thing: someone else had been there. When conventional leads dried up, investigators turned their attention to a group often ignored in official reports. The people who live in the wilderness. Not tourists, not rangers, not weekend hikers. Men who trap, men who guide, men who disappear for months at a time and answer to no one. They are known locally as overwinterers, individuals who maintain cabins or camps far from roads, surviving year-round in isolation. Some are veterans, some are fugitives from past lives. Some are simply broken people who couldn't exist in cities anymore. They know every animal trail, every hidden crossing, every place a body will never be found. And most importantly, they do not talk. Investigators compiled a list of about a dozen overwinterers whose camps fell within a 2-day radius of the valley. Reaching them was an ordeal. Some required helicopters, others were accessed by aging snowmobiles or all-terrain vehicles. Each visit felt like stepping into another century. Crude cabins, walls lined with rifles, traps hanging from rafters, men with eyes trained to measure threat instantly. Most interviews went nowhere. Didn't see anyone? Don't hike there. Mind your business. But one conversation changed everything. His name was Elias Rowe. He had lived in the Yukon backcountry for over 40 years. White beard, weather-scarred face, eyes that never stopped watching. When shown Elena's photo, Elias stared at it longer than the others. Then he spoke. "People with cameras think the woods are empty," he said. "They don't notice what's watching them." Investigators pressed him. Elias admitted that shortly before the couple vanished, he had seen someone else in the valley, not a tourist. The man didn't wear bright gear, didn't follow trails, moved slowly, deliberately, like he was patrolling. Tall, middle-aged, eyes that Elias described as hollow. And then Elias said something that made the room go quiet. He wasn't afraid of the dark out there. That's how you know. After the disappearance, the man was gone, never seen again. Investigators began reviewing park employment records, seasonal workers, maintenance staff, remote patrol assignments, and then they found him. Lucas Brent, former special operations soldier, multiple overseas deployments, hired as a remote trail maintenance contractor. Colleagues described him as exceptionally skilled, highly withdrawn, prone to sudden aggression, obsessed with solitude. He preferred assignments far from other staff. Brent had resigned abruptly in late September 2023, days after the search for Caleb and Elena was suspended. The timing was impossible to ignore. Detectives traveled to Brent's registered residence near the northern border. The house was empty. Neighbors said he had packed up quickly about a week earlier, left no forwarding address, said only one thing before disappearing: "I'm going back where things make sense." Brent became the prime suspect. But there was a problem. Just like Caleb Morgan, he was gone. No financial activity, no sightings, no trail. 2 men had vanished into the same wilderness. Only one body had come back. As weeks passed, investigators began discussing something they would never put in writing. What if Caleb hadn't been killed immediately? What if he had been forced to participate? The theory was grotesque, psychologically devastating, but it explained the footprints, the ritual, the absence of struggle. It explained why Elena's body had been left behind and why Caleb had vanished completely. But there was no proof, only silence. And in the Yukon, silence is often the final answer. By the time Lucas Brandt's name reached the media, the case had already crossed an invisible line. This was no longer just a murder in the wilderness. It was the possibility of a predator who understood isolation better than anyone searching for him. Brandt's photograph flooded news outlets across northern Canada. A hard face, close-cropped hair, eyes that looked distant even in posed images. Authorities urged hunters, pilots, trappers, and remote lodge operators to report any sightings. But the Yukon is vast beyond comprehension. A man with Brandt's skill set could survive for years without being seen. And it didn't take long before the search took its first unsettling turn. 2 weeks after Brandt was named a person of interest, his pickup truck was discovered. It was parked deliberately at the edge of an old access trail, one that led deep into a mountain range known for swallowing aircraft and hikers alike. The keys were inside. The gas tank was full. There was no sign of struggle. Brandt had walked away on purpose. Investigators followed his tracks as far as they could. Then, just like before, they disappeared. No looping trails, no backtracking, no indication of direction. It was as if Brandt had written his own ending. Even if Brandt had murdered Elena Pierce, enormous gaps remained. Why mutilate her in such a specific way? Why remove her eyes and tongue? Why leave her body in a ravine instead of hiding it? And the most painful question, what happened to Caleb Morgan? 3 dominant theories emerged. Brandt encountered the couple in the valley. He killed both of them. Elena's body was left as a symbol, a message. Caleb's body was disposed of far more effectively. Dropped into a glacial crevasse, weighted and sunk into a deep lake, buried where the ground would never thaw. This theory was logical and completely unprovable. Caleb witnessed Elena's murder and fled. In panic, injury, or shock, he ran into the wilderness. The Yukon does not forgive fear. He could have died of exposure days or weeks later. His remains might still be out there, or gone entirely. This theory spared Caleb's reputation, but it didn't explain the footprints. Investigators spoke of it only in private. What if Brandt didn't kill Caleb? What if he broke him? Psychological dominance, threats, control. What if Caleb was forced to assist, or to watch? It would explain the absence of a struggle, the ritualistic mutilation, the deliberate placement of the body, and it would explain why Caleb vanished without leaving evidence. Because sometimes the worst prison is survival itself. By autumn, snow returned. Search operations were scaled back. Lucas Brandt was never found. No weapon was recovered. No confession. No remains of Caleb Morgan. The investigation stalled. Officially, the case was suspended pending new evidence. Unofficially, it joined a list of stories the Yukon prefers to bury. Elena Pierce's family buried an empty coffin. They knew how she died. They would never know why. Caleb Morgan's family lived in limbo. Was he a victim? A survivor? An accomplice? They had no body to mourn, no truth to hold on to, only questions. Somewhere beyond the last trail markers, the land remains unchanged. Snow falls, rivers carve deeper paths, footprints vanish, and if Lucas Brandt is still alive, he is exactly where he belongs, because the wilderness doesn't hide monsters, it creates them. In the end, the wilderness did what it always does. It waited. Months passed, then years, and nothing changed. By early 2025, the case of Elena Pierce's murder and Caleb Morgan's disappearance had been reduced to a sealed file marked inactive. Not solved, not closed, just abandoned by necessity. There were no suspects in custody, no weapon, no motive that could be proven in court. Only fragments of a story scattered across thousands of square miles of uninhabited land. Investigators would later admit that this case haunted them more than most, because nothing about it behaved the way crimes were supposed to. Forensic specialists revisited Elena's injuries again and again. The removal of the eyes, the cutting of the tongue, these were not acts of random cruelty. In anthropology and criminal psychology, those injuries carry symbolic meaning. Eyes to prevent seeing, tongue to silence. It suggested control, not just over the victim, but over the narrative itself. Whoever did this wanted something erased. What or who that was remains unknown. The footprints remain the most disturbing element. Experts recreated the scene using dozens of theories. None worked. No human explanation accounted for footprints that began at a body and ended nowhere. The 3D scans still sit in an evidence archive. Studied, argued over, quietly feared. One investigator summarized it best. It's not that we don't know what happened. It's that whatever happened doesn't fit inside our understanding of reality. Lucas Brandt was never seen again. No sightings, no remains, no evidence he ever left the wilderness. Some believe he died within days. Others believe he's still out there, older now, deeper in hiding, moving through places no one else dares to enter. In a land where people disappear every year, one more ghost does not stand out. And then there is Caleb Morgan, the missing man without a conclusion. His bank accounts remain untouched. His phone never powered on. His body never surfaced. Was he murdered? Did he run? Was he broken into something unrecognizable? No theory offers mercy. To this day, his name exists in 2 databases: missing persons, persons of interest, a contradiction that will likely never be resolved. Local trappers still avoid the side valley. They don't explain why. Pilots report strange feelings flying over it. Hikers say their satellite devices malfunction there more than anywhere else. And every spring when the snow melts, rangers quietly check the ravine. Nothing new has ever appeared. The land has spoken once. It has no reason to speak again. This story does not end with justice. It ends with absence. 2 young people entered the wilderness seeking silence and beauty. One came back altered beyond recognition. One never came back at all. And somewhere in that vast, frozen expanse, the truth remains buried, not because it cannot be found, but because some places do not want to be understood. The Yukon does not forget. It simply keeps.